Hello adventurers! My name is Benny from Boardgame Raccoon, and in this series of short videos I want to give you a little taste of what awaits you in the second part of our solo game series, Between Light and Shadow. So join me in this video as we delve deep into the dungeons. Before we start, just a quick note. This is an early prototype. There will be changes, and as we are currently balancing every day, this is just the home printed and quickly cutted German version, but it should be enough to give you a first impression. So let's talk about dungeons. In the second chapter of Between Light and Shadow, you will have to descend deep into dungeons to find mysterious artifacts or defeat sinister villains. To successfully complete a dungeon, you have to overcome all the threats lurking in its depth. A dungeon always consists of a series of threat cards. These are available in different difficult levels, depending on how difficult the dungeon is. For example, an easy dungeon would consist of 3 level 1 threats, that is 3 of these cards. A slightly more difficult dungeon would also have a level 2 card, for example, and so on. Threat cards can be anything, from enemies that you have to fight to traps and obstacles. Here, for example, we have to overcome an old wooden door, or here, get past a pitfall. Of course, there are also special threats that only occur in certain dungeons or scenarios, but for now, let's concentrate on overcoming all the normal threat cards in order to successfully master a dungeon. To overcome a threat card, you must achieve certain values for your attributes. There are basically 3 attributes: force, dexterity, and mind. Not every card requires all attributes, some only need 1 of them, or give you several to choose from, some need 2 or even 3. You can always see how many of the required attributes you need to achieve here in the top corner of the card. And this panel shows you which value you need to achieve for which attribute. Our old wooden door here, for example, only requires 1 attribute. This can be either force or dexterity. So we can force the door open or pick the lock. No matter which attribute we try, we need a value of 2. The climbing passage here also requires force and dexterity. But the card requires 2 attributes, so we have to fulfill both in order to overcome it. The required attributes are represented in the game with dice, which you turn to the corresponding value and place on the box as soon as you enter the corresponding threat card. If you gain a point in a corresponding attribute, for instance dexterity, you simply reduce the die by 1. If you have reduced one of these dice to 0, you remove it and see how many dice you need to have to remove. Each threat card also has a special one-time or permanent effect that makes it special to solve, as well as values for light damage, heavy damage, and if you fail to complete the card. But for now, let's take a look at how you gain points in your attributes to overcome a threat. To overcome threat cards, we need our exploration deck here. This represents our skills to reach different abilities. Each card consists of 3 areas: a light skill at the top, a shadow skill at the bottom, and a few squares that will form a dice roll later. If we manage to move a matching die onto one of the skills, this skill is activated. Skills are always structured in the same way. Here on the left you can see the starting effect. That is, whether the skill is triggered immediately or is a repeatable skill. Here you can see the name and the actual effect of the skill. And here on the right you can see the ending effect of the skill, in other words, what happens to the die after the skill is used. A die can be burned, meaning it is removed. A die can be chained, that is remaining here blocking the card, or the die can return, in which case we get the die back with a specified value. The actual skills are, of course, what we want to achieve. Above all, this is where we get the abilities we need to overcome dungeon cards. For example, if we pull up a white 3 or more here, we can see that the devotion skill is performed immediately. So we immediately gain 2 force and can reduce a die on a dungeon card with force by 2. Once we have done this, the end effect of the skill indicates that the die is burned, so it is removed. If we have used the shadow skill, this would also be applied immediately, and we would have got the die back with a value of 3. There are, of course, many other effects that can help you in a dungeon. For example, we can move cards in our row, change, move, or even jump with dice, and much more. But how do we get dice to our skills? At the start of each dungeon, our exploration deck is shuffled and placed here in a row. In addition, we take our dice and place them here according to our starting values. This way, our cards form a row of spaces for the dice on which they can move from here to the end of the row. Now it's time to get started. We can use any recurring skill with this symbol on that is displayed face up. These are mainly our 3 basic skills here. First, we can reduce a die to move it 1 space in our row here. But be careful, we can't skip any other die and we trigger all the spaces we enter. So we can't move this 6 here if we haven't made room first. And if we enter this square by moving, we would suffer the light damage of the current dungeon card. There's also another ability called Jump, which allows us to move a die in the row without considering the spaces, but this is not available to us yet. Our second basic skill allows us to move a die in the row up or down to a suitable square. White dice can only move up, black dice can only move down. In addition, the values in the squares must match. And there must be no die on the other side. For example, if there is a black die here, I cannot move a white die up even if the value matches. As soon as a die enters a white or black square, the skill is triggered. We have already seen how instant skill works. With recurring skills, the die remains in place and we can perform the indicated action whenever we want instead of one of the basic skills. However, we usually have to reduce the die on the card to do this. If we reduce a die by so much that we can no longer perform the skill, the end effect of the card occurs, so the die is burned, remains there, or returns. If we reduce a die to 0 in whatever way, it is, you guessed it, immediately removed and is no longer available to you for the rest of the dungeon. So let's try opening that old wooden door from earlier. We need either 2 force or 2 dexterity. The easiest way would certainly be to move a black die in here and activate this skill. This would give me 3 force. I would just rage and smash the door down. Since it's an instant effect, that wouldn't be a problem. However, the end effect of the card says that the die stays there. So the entire card would be blocked for the rest of the dungeon. Another possibility is this effort skill here, which gives us 1 force or 1 dexterity. To do this, we move a white die forward by 1 after we have reduced it. Now do the whole thing again. Now we enter the light damage space. For our current dungeon card, this means that the die is reduced by 2 and would therefore be removed from the game. Of course, we don't want that, so let's undo the whole move. But we still have other skills. Let's move this black die here. Reduce, move, reduce, move, apply the light damage. Now we can move it down because it has a value of 2 or more. With this new ongoing skill, we can always reduce our black die here by 1 to increase another die by 1. Let's do this once to bring our white die here, which we need right away, to 5. Now we move our white die again. Reduce, move, reduce, move, apply the light damage. But we can't move it up yet, as there is still a die on the black side. So let's use this ongoing ability again. We reduce the black die by 1 here, which burns it to increase any die by 1. Now the card is free and we can move the white die up, which immediately gives us 1 dexterity. So we reduce the dexterity die by the odd wooden door to 1. The end effect of the card tells us that we can now retrieve this white die with a value of 1. So we place it at the beginning of the row with a 1. We can now do the same thing again with the next white die. Reduce, move. Reduce, move. Light damage. Move up. Get a dexterity. Retrieve the die. This allowed us to overcome the old wooden door, as we need either dexterity or force. Whenever we have overcome a dungeon card, the front exploration card is placed at the end of the row. And now we move on to the next threat card that stands in our way. The Pitfall. We only need 2 dexterity, but beware, this card has a permanent effect that we always have to reduce any returning die by 1. So the same strategy as we just used will not work. It also has a different effect on light damage, so we should think very carefully about how to deal with this threat. And so we progress through the threats of a dungeon until we have overcome them all and successfully completed the dungeon. This gets us further in the story and also allows us to improve our exploration deck. After each dungeon, we are given a number of cards to choose from that corresponds to the threats and can select one of them for our deck. For example, if we have completed a dungeon with 3 cards from the level 1 threat pile, we take 3 cards from here and choose one of them for our deck. As you can imagine, there are some really nice improvements in here. We can also thin out our deck with experience and improve the values of our dice. But I will tell you about that and some other stuff in the next video. Until then, stay adventurous!